former drug dealer that recently graduated from a programming bootcamp sets out to build an online casino and poker card room. He makes his plan known to the world in early January, and on the 10th of that very month, he releases his first collection, a free mana that goes by the name of Pixel Poker Tour. On February 15, Pitbull Poker Tour, Agra's main collection, is released to the world, a project that could be labeled as the slowest rock pool of all time. For a period of about 8 months, Dylan promised the world utilities, revenue share, breeding houses, you name it. The sky was the limit, but our leader didn't know that, and he kept on flying towards that sun. Everything that comes up must come down. And just as our floor price crashed and burned, the Supreme Leader's wax and wings got melted by the sun, and he fell straight down into the pits of hell. Who exactly was the Supreme Leader? My first impression of him was that of a kind and selfless person. He was giving away a lot of discount coupons to the people in his server. Not only that, but he was generous with the prizes in his poker tournaments. This is what I could gather from a surface level. If you were to go a bit deeper than that, you'd realize that Dylan's life story was a bit tragic. He was raised in a trailer that got foreclosed, and later on during his childhood, he moved to a Section 8 apartment. None of his friends were a role model, to say the least, and Agra wasn't the only one who had it rough in his family. His mother was stolen from her parents by a crazy aunt. After going through something like that, it's no wonder that she developed some serious mental health issues. Agra's grandpa murdered his second wife, and there are a couple news articles that talk about that. You know what they say, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, and the Supreme Leader ended up with some chronic anxiety issues that he will self-medicate for with weed. Well, I come from a long line of anxious, mentally ill people. As you can see by my grandpa murdering his second wife and the shit my dad does. My mom's legally disabled for anxiety as well. By naturally, I mean without being under the influence of anything, but I've been anxious since I was a toddler. I remember when I was in kindergarten doing sit-ups in school. I would start crying because looking up at the tall gym ceiling will give me panic attacks because of the existential aspect of being so small in such a big world, etc. Even now, if I look at the stars at night, I go into panic attacks. It's pretty fucked. As far as sleep paralysis, if I don't smoke at least like 10 times a night, I get stuck, unable to move at all. And all I can do is snore really loud to try to wake up my girlfriend. It freaks her out because she'll randomly wake up to me snoring aggressively like a fucking warthog or something. But now, she knows if that's happening, it's me trying to scream from my sleep and she wakes me up. Not fun. It's common to give everyone you meet the benefit of the doubt. They tell you things that you have no way of verifying in any fashion, and normally, you don't even question it. You take their word for it. And this was the case with Dylan. He said things and we believed him. But the more you learn about an individual, the easier it gets to question things if they don't happen to line up. While working in this movie, quote unquote, I was doubting a lot of the things related to the Supreme Leader's story. For instance, the whole thing about his grandpa murdering his second wife. If it weren't for those two news articles, I wouldn't believe it because it's too far-fetched, and there's so many things related to Agra's story that are just weird and hard to believe. I can spot a lot of similarities between grandfather and grandson. Both were gamblers. Grandpa raised and ran horses while grandson commissioned and minted horses. Grandpa's victim worked at a place called Malone while one of his grandson's victims is named Malone. Grandpa abandoned a pack of dogs while his grandson abandoned an even bigger pack of dogs. Even in both of these stories, there's a theme of donating money to a dog shelter. We know a few things about Dylan's childhood and his family lineage, but what about his teenage years? Luckily for us, he also talked about that period of his life. From like 15 to 20 years old, all I knew was selling drugs. Like, that was literally my entire lifestyle, and the majority of my efforts went into selling drugs, maximizing profits, etc. Basically, like focusing super professionally on something that really could not end well, all things considered. I ended up going to jail for a short time on some bullshit, and immediately after I got fucked on my last $10,000 through a marketplace scam on the darknet. Basically, wiped me clean, and I was just like depressed as shit. After being taken to jail and going broke, Agra went to college and was studying to be a teacher, but switched majors after a year, going for audio engineering, which was one of his hobbies. The following paragraph is something you should pay close attention to. I had been programming on my own for a bit at this point, but due to imposter syndrome, I didn't really think much would come out of it. But with my 2 months left on the semester, I started genuinely considering transitioning my engineering expertise expertise from audio to software. I figured the only way I'd have real success was if I had something on paper, so while still in school, I applied to a coding bootcamp in order to have something legitimate on my development resume. I started bootcamp March 1st virtually while simultaneously attending audio school. 1 week later, COVID hit the US, and we ended up cutting the semester short, almost in a perfect fashion. He talked about imposter syndrome, but he was an imposter. A bad developer calling himself a software engineer. Elon Musk, who is the real deal when it comes to Web3 development, refers to himself as a dev. He doesn't call himself a software engineer. There are only a couple different kinds of people who go for fancy titles when referring to themselves. Snake oil salesmen, for instance, and pretenders. People who try to make others think more highly of them by the use of their words because they lack the skills to prove their worth. Also, there is no overlap between working with audio and being a developer. In the following paragraph, he talks about becoming really invested in his career and job hunting. He said he managed to find a job making $120,000 a year, but who was his employer? I think you will want to list such an employer in your LinkedIn account. Another thing that makes me doubt this claim of his is how would you go from working for someone who's paying you $120,000 a year, doing freelance and taking a job with a bad pay? It doesn't make sense to me, along with most other things related to Agra. After the dust settled, I became doubtful of the Supreme Leader's character. I started to wonder if this project was meant to be a scam ever since its inception. Jokes about the PPT being a rock pool, cream pieing people, these things didn't seem like a red flag at the time, but now they were something worth looking into. Agra is not a reliable narrator, but there's someone else close to him that might give us some helpful information. Meet Agra's girlfriend. Well, right now Agra is the one using her account, but she's a real person. Trust me. According to Lady Agra, he was very poor, but made a lot of money recently. Considering that they were together for 4 years when she wrote this, he must have gotten his wealth sometime between 2021 and 2022. With all the information available to me, I see two different scenarios, one more likely than the other. I'll leave that up to you to decide. The Supreme Leader had a good paying job, which he left due to the stress, so that he could focus on the project. The Supreme Leader never had a good paying job, and that's something he said to make people think he was a competent developer. Up until May, Agra was busy with the Pitbull Poker Tour, but sometime after that month, he started working other jobs and pretty much became a one-man dev team when it came to the front-end aspect of the card room. Before, I got into all the promises and announcements that were made related to the project, but let me focus on the things that the project delivered on, which isn't much. Pixel Poker Tour was released in January. In February, the main collection of Pitbull Poker Tour was released and Bluff got implemented. In March, Bad Bitches Billiards Club was airdropped to holders. In April, the PPT Casino opened up with only one game made available, Roulette. Calling it the PPT Casino is a bit misleading because it was a white label created by High Roller Hippoclick where they got most of the money generated. This month, Agra also held what at the time was called PPT Week. We didn't know it, but that was the peak of the project as a whole. Everything went downhill after that. First and last revenue share of the project took place this month. Pitbull holders received about $8,354 collectively, while Pixel holders received about $1,670. In May, the PPT Sportsbook beta went live, and a few days later, the actual PPT Casino opened up with one game, Coin Flip. In June, the Horses of How High collection went live. This was the straw that broke the dog's back. Up until the horses, people were very optimistic about the state of things, but the existence of the horses became an alarming sign for the community. Agra was all talk and no action. The things that we got were a little more than a distraction from the substance of the project, which was the card room, which kept on being delayed until the eventual death of the project. Also, this month marked the beginning of Agra's departure from the server. He stopped being as active as he used to be and was harder to spot on the main chat. In July, a few members of the community were part of a private beta test of the card room. The card room did see a few different rounds of testing, but they were all private. There isn't much information about them in the open, but what I do know is that the card room was buggy and had issues, which is to be expected since they were closed betas. On this last test that took place on July though, it seems that the card room was working mostly fine. This is the one piece of the puzzle that had people like DMC scratching his head. We were so close. The finish line is right there. If you need money, we can do a second funding round to get the card room completed, but Agra chose not to. In August, nothing of relevance happened for the project. In September, Agra made his last announcement on the PPT server. This last announcement raised a lot of red flags for the community. The pit boss tourney was also cancelled. After this point, MK and DMC took over the communications aspect of the project. They will talk to Agra and pass to us the things he said. In October, Agra made an announcement on Medium, and in November, the last announcement Agra ever did related to the PPT was posted on Medium. He also gave some tokens to holders related to Halloween treats or something. There's a hidden message in this post that reads, "Go to pitbullpokertour.com. If you do that, you'll be greeted by this message." The history of Agra can be summarized in the following way. A mentally ill criminal with a family history of mental illness plans to build a poker card room. He raises a limited amount of funds and goes on to give lots of different prizes to the members of his community. A trip to Vegas plus $1,000 here, around $700 a week in tournament prizes there, and about $10,000 worth of revenue share split among all Pitbull and Pixel NFT holders. On a 7-month journey, he leads on his community, only to end up not delivering the card room and ghosting everyone he was involved with. So, was the PPT meant to be a rock? No, I don't think so. We did have a card room, which means he spent money on getting that done. Even though it was a failure, Agra released a betting book website. I'm not sure about the exact amount, but he must have given something like $5,000 worth of prizes in the poker tournaments alone. Long story short, he tried. He didn't have what it takes to be a good leader, but he attempted to achieve the goal he set out for himself, which means he wasn't a scammer rocker from the get-go at least. He was just a hypocrite. Agora's story has come to an end. He abandoned that name long time ago, allegedly losing the password to the Discord account and also no longer being active on his Twitter. So, what lies in store for us? The spiritual successor to the PPT is King's Discord server. There you can find a lot of the OGs from the PPT, and it's an active community. There are no NFTs tied to it. It's just people who like to play poker, who hang out and talk about the game and all sorts of random stuff. The spirit of the PPT lives on through that server. When it comes to our Pitbull Discord server, MK now has the keys, so no one is going to delete it anytime soon. Our chances of some sort of revival are slim to none. This has been a total loss. There's no way to salvage the IP or whatever because there's nothing to be salvaged. I mean, one thing we did get out of this whole thing were the friends we made along the way, but that's about it. And we do have a lot of human resources and manpower. If we were to really push to make something, I'm sure something could happen. I'm sure we could make something happen, but the problem with that is I don't think people have the motivation or the morale to try to push for anything or try to do anything now that the leader is gone. We've been dead for a long time. Yeah, it's pretty hard to motivate people when everything has come crashing down. So it's a shame, but I think there's no future for the PPT as it is. Yeah, our story has concluded as a community, but that doesn't mean we can't move on and become part of some new communities. I don't plan to go anywhere. I'll be making shitty videos until I get bored of this. So see you soon, brothers. There's still a lot of stories I can tell about things that were talked about in the server. Up until now, I've been focusing on the bad things, the sad things, but there were a few nice moments and funny moments that took place in that server. Maybe later on I'll be focusing on that instead, since this tragic story has already been told. There's room for the bright stories to be spoken of. And I want to give a special thanks and a shout out to MK for gifting me this mic, and also a special thanks to DMC, Relentless, Giannis, Nick, Slammer, Kang, Rhodes, Move, Bob, Jovan, Relius, Rusky, Randy, Frank, ESG, them. I know I'm forgetting some names, but you guys made the whole PPT journey worth it. We all lost money, but at least it was fun. And hey, who knows what may come up in the future. We're still alive, even though the PPT is dead. Who knows what lies in store for us.